The letter was already on the desk when she arrived that morning. It was September of 1956, and the schoolhouse in Wickenburg, Arizona, sat at the edge of a wide, flat road with one cottonwood tree out front that dropped its leaves early every year. The kind of place where the same families had been sending their children for 3 generations, where the flag was raised every Monday without being asked, where the chalk dust settled on the windowsills and the smell of it never fully left the room after the children went home. Superintendent Harold Bowes had driven up from Phoenix with a folder on the passenger seat of his sedan and a county form already filled out in duplicate. He had done this before. He was polite about it. Margaret Elaine Conroy stood in the doorway of her own classroom and read what was in her hand. The room had gone quiet. The custodian, a man named Ruiz who had worked that building for 11 years, stood at the far end of the hallway with a mop he had stopped pushing. The principal, who had already signed the form, did not come out of his office. Bowes explained that the board had concerns about certain materials she had assigned the previous spring, about a letter she had written to the county education committee, about the kind of instruction that some parents had described in writing as unsuitable. He explained this the way a man explains a plumbing problem. He was sorry for the inconvenience. The form was already signed. In the back corner of the principal's office, visible through the open door, a large man in a canvas jacket and a battered tan Stetson was sitting in the chair that faced the window. He had been there since early that morning, working through a conversation about using the school auditorium for a benefit screening his production company was organizing. He was not supposed to be part of what was happening in the hall. He had not been introduced to Margaret Conroy. He had no reason to stand up. He was watching. Here is the story. Margaret Conroy had been teaching 3rd grade at Wickenburg Elementary for 9 years. She had come out from Tulsa in the summer of 1947 with a teaching certificate, $43, and the understanding that rural Arizona schools needed people who were willing to stay. She stayed. She learned the families, the Delgado children who came in September from the cotton harvest, the Hawkins boys who wore the same shoes 2 sizes too small until February, the girl in the second row named Pauline, who could already read at a 5th grade level and whose parents had never been told. Margaret told them. She drove out to the ranch on a Saturday, on her own time, to say so. She borrowed books from the Phoenix library system by writing letters and waiting 3 weeks for the return post. She taught reading by whatever means she had. 9 years. She had not missed a day of instruction for illness in 4 of them. Her husband Robert had died of a heart event in the summer of 1953, 41 years old, on a Thursday morning before the coffee was finished. He had been a surveyor for the state. He left her the house with 11 months remaining on the mortgage and a 1949 Ford that ran if you knew what to ask of it. She paid the mortgage alone through the 3 years that followed. She did not apply for assistance. She did not tell her colleagues the particulars. She graded papers at the kitchen table in the evenings and drove the Ford to school every morning and stood in front of 31 children and did the job she came to do. The letter Superintendent Bowes placed in her hand that September morning was the result of one complaint, formally lodged, from a man named Lester Pruitt, whose son had been in her class the previous year. She had assigned a reading from a public library collection, a story about a Mexican boy and his family working in the fields of California. Pruitt had written to the county board in June. The board had deliberated through the summer. The form was dated September 4th, 1956. It was now September 6th. She had 2 days of instruction she would not be permitted to give. Bowes stood in the hallway and shifted his folder from one hand to the other and said something about severance and about the district being grateful for her years of service. He said the word years the way a man says it when he has already stopped counting them. His car was parked at the curb with the engine off and the windows up. He was not going to be long. Down the hall, Ruiz still had not moved the mop. The man in the principal's office stood up from the chair. He did it slowly, the way a man stands up when he has already decided what comes next and is not in any particular hurry to prove it. He set a coffee cup on the edge of the desk. He put on his hat. He walked through the doorway and into the hall, and he did not stop walking until he was standing 6 feet from Harold Bowes. He was a large man. The hallway was not wide. Bowes looked up. The man said, "What's the charge?" Bowes explained again about the board, about the form, about the parental concern, about the county's position on curricular materials. He was polite about it. He had the folder. The man said, "1 letter." It wasn't a question. Bowes said that the board had reviewed the complaint thoroughly and that the decision had been arrived at properly through the established process. The man looked at the form in Margaret Conroy's hand. He looked at it for a moment. He looked at her. He said, 9 years. He was not asking. He turned back to Bowes. He said, "You're going to drive back to Phoenix, and you're going to write a letter to that board from my office. I'll have someone call ahead to let them know it's coming. The letter will say the complaint was reviewed and found insufficient. It'll say Mrs. Conroy is reinstated without condition as of this morning." He let that settle in the air of the hallway for a moment. The superintendent of Maricopa County Schools does not want the name John Wayne attached to the conversation he is about to have with that board. I'm telling you that as a professional courtesy, not as a threat, as a courtesy. Bowes looked at the folder. He looked at the folder for a long time. "I'll need to make a call," he said. "There's a phone in the office behind you," the man said. "I'll wait outside." He waited under the cottonwood tree and smoked a cigarette and watched the road. He had a film beginning principal photography in 10 days. He had a production company with 17 employees and a location scout who needed an answer by Friday, and a co-star flying in from New York the following week. He stood under the cottonwood tree in the September heat and finished the cigarette, and did not appear to be thinking about any of those things. Ruiz came out 22 minutes later and told him the superintendent had made his call and was getting back in his car. Inside the building, Margaret Conroy was sitting at her own desk with the door closed. She had the county form in her hands, and then she didn't, because someone had come in and taken it from her and replaced it with a different piece of paper. She read the new letter. She read it again. It said reinstatement. It said effective immediately. It said the Board of Maricopa County regrets any disruption to the continuity of your service and thanks you for your patience during this review. Her hand shook once. Then it steadied. She could hear the cottonwood tree through the open window. If you've ever watched someone be treated like they didn't count and felt helpless to do anything about it, drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. She taught for 22 more years. She retired in June of 1978. There was a small cake in the break room and a card signed by every teacher in the building, including 3 who had been students in her class in the 1950s. She still drove the road to school every morning the same way she always had, and when she didn't drive it anymore, she could feel the shape of it in her hands on the wheel. 22 more years on top of the 9 they had tried to take. 31 years total, in the same room, with the same cottonwood tree outside the window. The Delgado children, and then the Delgado grandchildren. A boy named Charlie Vasquez, who sat in the 3rd row in 1956, and who had never once, in 9 months, looked like he believed school was a place that was meant for him. Until February, when Margaret stayed after school 3 Tuesdays in a row and read to him one-on-one until something shifted, and then did not shift back. Charlie graduated from Wickenburg High School in 1965. He became a teacher's aide in Phoenix. Pauline, the girl in the second row who could read at a fifth-grade level at 8 years old, became a librarian in Flagstaff. She ran a reading program for migrant children for 31 years. When people asked how she had ended up in Flagstaff doing that particular work, she said that a teacher in Wickenburg had driven out to her parents' house on a Saturday to tell them their daughter was exceptional. She said that was the thing. She didn't always have words for what came after that. She said it mattered, and left it there. In 1974, Charlie Visquez was working as a teacher's aide in a Phoenix elementary school when a young woman named Darlene Soto was told her contract would not be renewed. The reasons given were administrative. The position, it was explained, was being eliminated for budgetary reasons. Charlie Visquez drove to the district office on a Tuesday morning and sat in the waiting area until someone would see him. He brought the numbers. He brought the reading scores from Darlene Soto's students. He brought a written summary of what she had done for 17 children who came in 2 grade levels behind. He sat there until the decision was reversed. He never said where he learned to do that. He didn't think of it as a thing he had learned. He thought of it as a thing a person does. Margaret Conroy died in February of 1994 in Wickenburg, in the house she had paid off in 1958. She is buried on the north side of town. The headstone says her name, the years, and below them a single line, teacher. 31 years. In the classroom where she stood that September morning, there is a framed photograph near the window. It is a class photograph from 1962. She is in the back row with 28 children in front of her. The cottonwood tree is visible through the glass behind her. In the afternoon light that comes through that window every September, the photograph looks like it could be any year at all. It could be the year she arrived. It could be any year she stayed. John Wayne never spoke of what happened in that hallway. Not to his director. Not in any interview from that year or any of the years that followed. Not to a reporter, not in a letter, not to anyone who ever put his words to paper. There is no record of his account of that morning in Wickenburg. There is only what Ruiz the custodian told his daughter, what the principal's secretary wrote in a personal diary that was found in a cardboard box in 2003, and what Superintendent Harold Bowes told his wife that evening when he came home, which was that he had made a mistake and corrected it, and he preferred not to discuss it any further. Wayne had work waiting. He had a film, a production company, a location scout, a co-star coming in from New York. He got in his truck and drove south toward Phoenix, and that was the end of his morning in Wickenburg, Arizona, he noticed people. The ones a room had quietly agreed not to see. He did not do this for recognition, because recognition requires someone to notice you noticing, and that was not how he moved through the world. He sat in that hallway for 9 years of a woman's life, and the time it took a man in a suit to shift a folder from one hand to the other. He understood what 9 years meant. He understood what it costs when a morning takes them. That is the measure. Not what a man does when the room is watching. What he does when the room has already looked away. If this story reached you, share it with someone who deserves to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.